All right, so welcome everyone to today's event. This is an artist talk in conjunction with our current exhibition, Master Metalsmith, Lynda Watson, Looking Back. My name is Maureen Smith, and I'm the museum's collections and exhibitions manager. I'm joined today by Josie Chumney, who is our registrar here at the museum, and she'll be assisting over Zoom. And of course, we have our Master Metalsmith, Lynda Watson, with us. So thank you all for being here today. Before we get started, I want to take a moment to acknowledge our supporters. The Metal Museum receives operating support through Arts Memphis and the Tennessee Arts Commission, and exhibition and programming support through the Wingate Foundation and Hyde Family Foundation. So thank you to our sponsors for their continued support. We truly appreciate it. And now to introduce Lynda Watson, the reason you are all here today. Lynda is a native of Orange, California, and she knew she was destined to be an artist when she began making jewelry out of vacuum cleaner parts in a friend's garage. Her official foray into the art world began with an AA in commercial art from the Orange Coast College, followed by a period of time spent working for the Buza Cardozo greeting card company. Watson went on to attend California State University, Long Beach, where she completed some undergraduate work in drawing and illustration before receiving a BA in general crafts and jewelry and an MA and MFA in jewelry/metals. Watson's work, whether jewelry, drawing, or mixed media, is about her life. It remembers the good times, the bad times, extensive travel, adventures, friendship, family, and celebrations. Visual images from these times are attached to the places in her memory, and characteristics of those places suggest the composition, determine the imagery, and dictate the surfaces that become the components of her work. Mental pictures, quick sketches, and occasional photographs provide saved images. From Burma and Turkey to her own backyard, life happens in places. Now, before I start turning things over to Lynda, I'd like you to remind everyone to please drop any questions that they have in our chat. Josie will be recording those, and then we'll be reading them off at the end for Lynda to answer. We'll take some time. I believe we're only going to be about 45 minutes, and then the remainder until 4:30 Central Time will be questions. So, let's see, without further ado, let me turn it on over to Lynda Watson.
Turn it back to the, go back to the, there you go. Okay, thank you so much. And thank you everybody for being here. I have a cat that might be making a little bit of noise during this. She's walking around meowing kind of loudly. So anyway, sorry about that. The museum show and the catalog were called Looking Back, and they are a look at 56 years of making my art with metal. This project has given me the opportunity to really look at the work I've done over the years. It is interesting to see how it has changed, how it has evolved, and how it has remained the same in its focus on places. Since my work is about my life, I need to tell you a little about my life. Actually, Maureen told you a little bit too, but I'll tell you a little bit about my life before I found metal, as it has had a really big influence on the way I represent subject matter. For the last 7, maybe 8 years before I took my first jewelry class, I had been seriously involved in the graphic side of the visual arts, which I assumed would eventually lead to a career in that area. I did a vocational AA degree in advertising design at Orange Coast College, worked in production doing color separations and lettering by hand for a greeting card company, and was in the last semester of a bachelor's degree program in drawing and illustration when I took my first jewelry class at Cal State Long Beach. I don't know exactly how to explain what happened at that point, but I knew that I had found what I wanted to do probably forever. It didn't take long for my future plans to change completely. I changed my major Fortunately, I had lots of classes in the crafts area as part of my BA program. So I proceeded to take every metals and jewelry class that was offered at Long Beach and elsewhere for the next 2+ years. I loved it all. The physicality, the alchemy, the challenges involved with working and understanding a new material, and the unique set of skills that were needed to work with it. My ideas ran ahead of my skills, and I was constantly having to explore new processes and materials, working towards getting a vocabulary that would allow me to make what I visualized. I learned first to fabricate, saw, file, solder, form, forge, and finish. Basic skills using sheet and wire. For the first few years, the work I made referred to my life, but mostly involved learning and experimentation and understanding the idea of wearability, which I had not really dealt with that much, and the forms that it can take. Next. This piece is called Dancing Buttons, and it is the earliest piece that was in both the show and the catalog. This piece was made in 1967, which I think was the second semester that I took jewelry. I made simple molds from some of my grandma's buttons, used them to make wax buttons, which I cast in silver to complete the forged wire neck piece. When I learned gloss wax casting, it was clear that I could use wax to develop graphic imagery for my work. I could actually draw with it, which was very exciting and worth exploring. Next. This is a landscape neck piece, and this is one of 3 large pieces that were part of my MA project. Cal State Long Beach did not have an MFA in the 1960s. It is a fantasy landscape that couldn't look more like it was made in the 60s, but it was a serious exploration of the use of wax wire and sheet. It was cast in sections, joined, and enameled. It was purchased out of my grad show for Objects USA in 1969 and ended up in the collection of the Museum of Art and Design in New York. I hadn't touched it since then until it was sent to me for some minor repairs prior to my sending it to the show in Memphis. Next. This is a Matthews next piece. In order to support myself during grad school, some friends and I established a studio in Belmont Shore for graphic design and jewelry. I made and successfully sold a line of cast jewelry, mostly rings and pendants, and also did commissions. The endeavor put me through grad school, but convinced me that I never, under any circumstances, ever want to make my living that way in the future. This neck piece ended up belonging to my sister. It's cast and fabricated. Next. I built some simple wearable forms and used printmaking grounds with nitric acid to develop complex etched surfaces. I've done this numerous times throughout my career, using the graphic images from my past for new pieces. Next. I have an intense curiosity and a strong memory of experiences and events. I'm fascinated with the things I find in places, the things that happen in places, and the differences between places. Much of the work that I do comes from travel, when my mind is free to wander and my vision is particularly acute. But places closer to home, and even those in my house and backyard, have become subject matter of my work. For over 50 years now, my work has been about places. This piece is called Downtown, and it's a bracelet that was reproduced from my original by Reed and Barton Silversmiths for their Signature 5 collection. The imagery for this is from photos of downtown Santa Cruz before the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, which destroyed a good portion of our downtown Main Street. And these were buildings that were there before the earthquake. Next. This is aerial view orange. When I was still living in Long Beach, I came across a manila envelope in a trash can behind my studio. It was full of negatives of aerial views of somewhere, I assumed Long Beach. I was fascinated by them, and they came with me to Santa Cruz when I moved to start teaching at Cabrillo College in 1970. I was hired to start a metals jewelry program and a crafts program. I had one classroom and no place for a studio at school or at the house that I had rented. I taught 5 6-hour classes per week, 3 or 4 preps, which didn't allow me much time to work. Whatever I made had to be made on the dining room table. I learned this wax process from Gio Pomodoro at a symposium in Long Beach, and I decided that it would be perfect for making an aerial view of my hometown, which is Orange, California. I had moved more than 400 miles north of there, and my visits to friends and family had become infrequent and consequently more memorable. I won't go into detail about how this was made, but suffice to say that I used a large slab of water-based clay to make a negative of the surface that you see here. A thin coat of wax was then painted over that clay form. The clay was dissolved, leaving the wax positive, which was cut into sections and cast in sterling silver, then rejoined as a neck piece. The pieces I did during this period in the early 70s were mostly large, inclusive cast and fabricated pieces about landforms, a lot of them seen from above. Some were sold, but others were recycled as parts for other pieces or used as metal to cast new pieces. Next. After about 6 years of teaching, I had moved to a place on the beach where I had a studio where I could fabricate. But I was still teaching a heavy load and simply wasn't satisfied with the work I was making. Long Beach now had the MFA, and I was asked to join the program. Now I had a really, really good reason to take a leave without pay and spend some time, real time, in my studio. I was interested in exploring ways of mixing metals to achieve imagery, as in various kinds of inlays and overlays using sterling and fine silver, copper, brass, gold, and alloys of these, and patinas as well. I also wanted to combine these with descriptive plastic surfaces using colored plastic sheet, carved, formed with heat, or inlaid with polyester casting resins. That's what this is. A group of large pieces resulted from this experimentation. And this is called Ladybug Brooch. And it's a sample of one of those pieces. Okay, next. The desert landscape neck piece. This recalls an overnight camping trip with some friends who towed a searchlight into the desert so we could shine the light on the various geological features there. We drew and photographed and got some amazing images. This piece includes resin into plexiglass at the bottom, as well as a number of mixed metal techniques, which those of you who do metal probably will recognize. There are other pieces that, there were a number of other pieces that include plastic parts, and most of them are from this series. Next. These are 3 pieces, the bottom one not necessarily, but that also contain the stuff I was working with the plastics. Colorado Summers is the piece at the top on the right, and it recalls the wonderful time spent in Vail and Minturn, Colorado, as a regular participant in the Summervale Art Workshop. There's dyed carved plexiglass underneath that surface, and the little green things that you see on the side there is Carmat vinyl, dyed Carmat vinyl that I used like as a gasket in a number of these pieces. The one on the left is where the San Andreas Fault crosses the Carrizo Plain. And in the spring, this is the place in California where the San Andreas Fault goes. In the spring, it is a notable place for wildflowers and a great place to camp. And both sides of the arrow that runs through that are have gaskets that are made of car mat vinyl. The big rock piece at the bottom was also a part of the series, but it was simply the inclusion of a kind of stone that I had not used before. It was, I bought the carved quartz en route to a camping adventure and just had to use it. These pieces are about specific events or times. All are viewed from above and all are composites of the landscape. Parts chosen and combined like a collage. There are 6 more pieces in this series. Notable that none have cast parts. Once I had a place where I could build pieces from sheet and wire, I rarely cast again. I wrote another thesis and had another show, an MFA show in 1976. Next. In the early 80s, I discovered that permanent markers could be used successfully to draw or paint over sandblasted metal. I devised a process using stencils that worked well and explored it extensively for the next few years. These are called, it started with tacos, and explores a form, at taco form, that could be used to protect the marker drawings that are on the inside. These pieces, the enclosed sections of these pieces, are almost completely painted, colored with permanent markers. This piece was made in 1982, and the color is still brilliant and permanent. Next. These pieces, and many of the other ones that I've made, have what I call graphic inclusion. It has had a place in my work from the very beginning. Graphic inclusion adds details, more fully describes, or literally pictures, additions to the narrative. It can be cast, etched, drawn, or simply found and incorporated. It helps complete the story and usually relies heavily on my graphic background to achieve. This piece is called Amid My Maps of the Canyon. And it documents the planning for a death march into the Grand Canyon on a wilderness trail with a friend of ours named Sparks. Next. Road trips to see family and friends were the impetus for much of the work I did in the late 70s and 80s. During a sabbatical, we took a 5-month trip around the country, which allowed me to explore the visual, cultural, and historical differences between the states and regions. The resulting pieces were the north-south, east-west pieces. North-south, Massachusetts, Louisiana is the one in the middle. It compares coastal structures, a lighthouse and an oil derrick. The one at the top is Arizona, Mississippi, which shows differences in terrain and vegetation. And the one at the bottom is called Fences, and it fences from Kentucky to Mississippi to Kansas. I kept a journal on these road trips, and what I noted in writing, combined with the ever-present visual images, made these easy and fun to conceive. There are 8 pieces in this series, again, mostly viewed from above. Next. Barbed wire pieces. The Barbed Wire Museum in La Crosse, Kansas is one of my favorite places. It has a huge collection of homemade and patented, sometimes manufactured, barbed wire from the early days to the present. I purchased the book, which is called the Barbed Wire Bible, which provided ideas and configurations for about 30 to 40 pieces that I did over a 10-year period. The Bible has just an illustration of every piece that has ever been patented of barbed wire, and it's pretty incredible. This was also a tremendous teaching tool. I made these barbed wire brooches when I didn't have time to make larger pieces, and there probably are altogether maybe 40, 45 of these that I don't have anymore. Next. Okay, this is called Japan Motifs. There's 3 of these pieces, and they're from a long-awaited trip to Japan. They consist of a collection of elements and surfaces from decorative and utilitarian Japanese items. They captured my impression of Japan at that time in the late 80s. So where does this work come from and how does it start? Some images just stick in my head, and this is often how my pieces start. Sometimes they will evolve into shapes or solid ideas. When I have something basic to run with, I start imagining the different ways I can make the piece to get the idea across. Should it be dimensional? How? Should it be walled, or should I use some forming process? What about the surface? Does it need a graphic element to complete the story? Should that be etched, drawn, or something else? How about including a collected item or stone? Once I've answered at least some of these questions, I will draw it over and over and make models if necessary until it becomes something that I would be excited to make. I try to work out procedural and technical issues at this point because with metal, a procedural mistake can destroy the whole piece, cause a real disaster. That's not to say that things can't change as I go, because sometimes they do, but thinking ahead saves many headaches. Next. I retired from Cabrillo in 1995. The work done in the years just prior to that consisted of small metal brooches based on residential architecture and small drawings of neighborhood houses at night. My hands were damaged to the extent that I couldn't attempt large pieces of jewelry at that point. Consequently, when I was named Santa Cruz County Artist of the Year in 1998, I decided to make big drawings for the show. This is from a series of 5 drawings. They're fairly large, and they were done with charcoal on white paper. Next. That same year, I spent a good bit of time on Cape Cod and began the large series of buoy drawings. These are 4 of them. Lobstermen on Cape Cod displayed collected buoys on structures of any kind on their property. I would find them, I would seek them out, photograph them at night, and then draw them, always with the owner's permission. While most of the lobstermen were proud of their displays, they had a hard time understanding my fascination with the Cape Codness of the whole thing. Now there are 8 big drawings or more like this. Okay, next. By about 2000, my hands had recovered enough to allow me to start making big, complex metal pieces again. And this time I was retired, I had the time to do it. There is a group of pieces from the early 2000s that really set my course for the next decade. And beyond, actually. I was traveling at home and abroad and recording stories in jewelry from everywhere. It was an exhilarating period. This piece is called Cape Cod Remembered. At that time, we had a cottage in Eastham on Cape Cod where I spent a good bit of time. This is the first time that I used drawings, under watch crystals, and shells to tell the story. It's all about the things that we had and that we did on the Cape. Next. This is called Newport with Mom and Mary. My sister bought a tiny place in Newport Beach to escape the Idaho winters when she retired. My mom, sister, and I spent some good times there in the short time before my sister died. We walked the beach incessantly, picking up shells and watching people. It was an important part of my life. These are some of the shells that we collected, and the drawings are from our night walks. Next. This feature is called Cape Cod Solo. I spent 2 weeks unexpectedly alone in a cottage on Cape Cod Bay in rural Northeastham. My mom and sister were unable to join me at that time, at the very last minute. The tide on Cape Cod Bay can go out a mile, leaving lots of tidal flats to explore. I walked, drew, photographed, and collected stuff all day, every day. Next. This piece is from an amazing trip to Chiapas in Mexico. Papel picado, which is the beautiful handmade cut paper that they do all over Mexico, provided a roof over a downtown street, making a cozy room full of festivity. They had music and dancing and all kinds of food. I couldn't pass up a chance to make a piece about that experience. Some of the panels I designed, and some were old and traditional. Actually, in reality, this piece is really in praise of my favorite tool, which is my jeweler's saw. It involved many days of sawing and drilling some more. It was technically simple and thoroughly enjoyable piece for me to make. Next. This is Outer Banks treasure. The shell fragments from the Outer Banks in North Carolina are unusual and beautiful in that they can be hundreds and even thousands of years old. They are pushed back and forth by the tides, making them smooth and soft edged. I attached them to a chainmail base so that they would be the primary element in this piece. So you would see almost no metal at all. I was able to return to the Outer Banks in 2020. I collected more shells at that time and made more pieces, this time brooches. Next. This piece is called Baja with the Boys. It's an early version of a bracelet format that I frequently used, and one that wouldn't be complete without the drawings and the way that they are presented. 3 guys and myself camped our way around Baja, never spending a night where there was a restroom or a shower. The trucks and the tequila were an important part of this trip. I collected the shells and, put it all together like that. Next. This is Alan and Gypsy's Ireland, another of the bracelets that I made in the early 2000s. The heavy oxidized links that are the bracelet describe the sort of chilliness and the somberness. It's a flexible format to start the narrative. I found elements, and those I made are added, and the drawings under the watch crystal clarify the location and complete the story. Next. This is called Maui Birthdays. My mom turned 90, my sister turned 60, and we took a family vacation to a fancy resort on Maui. There were lots of memorable times, but discovering where to find puka shells on the other side of the island was really big for me, as well as the number and variety of fish in the aquarium at Lahaina. The drawings remind me that we were in a resort. I found all those puka shells right on that side of the island. It was incredible. Okay, next. This is called Stupas in Bagan. And it's from this massive, beautiful Buddhist structures in Burma. This piece is particularly interesting to me because I visualized it exactly the way it looks now before I even got home. I remember sitting on the plane and having this whole thing come right to my head. I came home, cut it out of sterling sheet, etched it, added the gold, and there it was. Next. This is called Here, There, and Everywhere. I collect smashed pennies everywhere I find a machine. They are great souvenirs of some of the places I've been. People have always asked me what I plan to do with them, and I really never knew what I was going to do with them. And so I decided that I would make a project for myself, designing a bracelet with them. Next. This is called Shopping in Mexico. Old coins from early trips to Mexico and charms that I made from my first experience with precious metal clay. Celebrate my purchases from a wonderful Day of the Dead trip to Oaxaca. Next. Prague celebrations. Bouquets made of silver and gold with pearls and bone, these pieces here, were inspired by beautiful street bouquets in Prague that contained a lot more than flowers. Every morning I would run down to the street to see what this woman had done when she built the flowers that she brought for her bouquets that day. They were absolutely incredible. Okay, next. This is Cappadocia. I found a way of forming metal to resemble the architecture of this amazing place by making plexiglass shapes over which I could hydraulic press fine silver that's been printed with etched plates. It was a really fun process, and I was happy with the results. And it actually has become a go-to technique for dimensional forms for me, since then. Next. Now there should be Hawaiian flora should be next. It should be 2 pieces.
Sure, hold on just a moment, everyone. My apologies. Let's see, while I am solving our technical issue, if anybody has any questions so far for Lynda, if you want to put those in the chat, and I will be right with you.
We only have about 6 or 7 more pieces to go. But any questions?
Well, I can ask one. I'm not seeing any yet in the chat, but I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a medium or a technique that you haven't explored yet that you would really love to?
I don't know, because it all depends on what I see and what I decide I want to make. And I end up having to learn things and explore techniques because of a look that I want to get. And almost everything that I have explored is because of that. I need to have something that'll look like drawings, or I need something that'll look like this or that or the other thing. And that's how that's kind of how I work. And that's actually what keeps me really excited about working with metal. And also, combining it with other materials. I use a lot of other materials too now. So particularly like felt, the pieces that are going to come up are felt.
Perfect, thank you.
Mm-hmm. It's all a matter of need.
Okay, and I apologize, Lynda. It looks like the PowerPoint images did not save properly. So I have looking back, and then the COVID beach walks are the only images I have something of.
Okay. All right, those are the last 2. So we're missing just 4.
Yeah, let me see if I can bring up.
It's some of my favorite things. Scott's tools. Oh, actually, there's only 3, Maureen.
Okay.
Hawaiian flora, Scott's tools, and some of my favorite things.
All right. Let me see if I can't bring up some of the pictures I have. Sorry, everyone, please bear with us. Okay.
Lynda, if you like, there's a question in the chat that I could ask you. The question is, how did you manage to stabilize the permanent marker in your work?
First of all, it's really important that you sandblast the place, the area that you're going to paint. And you have to sandblast it with crushed garnet so that it becomes a surface that really holds the paint. And then the paint has to be applied fairly, lightly. And then I fix it with a marker fix and wax over that. Okay, so this is part of, this is part of what. Yep, there you go.
Perfect.
Okay, is there one more piece there that is a felt piece like that? If not, that's fine. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so those two should be in the same frame, but that's fine. Okay. All right, I'll just tell you a little bit about, I'll tell you a little bit about the two pieces that you've seen here. Hawaiian flora. I've gone to Hawaii quite a number of times, and every time I come back with drawings and photographs of the beautiful plants that I've seen in the arboretums and the gardens. And I wanted to do something with felt. I've been working with felt a lot, particularly when my hands don't really hold up to an awful lot of metalwork. So I started doing the flower forms with felt, and the stems and the leaves from oxidized silver. And I really liked the way they looked, but they needed some context. They needed to say where they came from and what they were about. And so the drawings provided that context, as well as the place to hide the neck bands, because all of these are pendants. Okay, now see, now you've gotten into the whole bunch of them. There's a series of 6 or so of these Hawaiian pieces. The drawings provide the place where the flowers and stuff grow. These pieces allow me to do 3 things that I like to do best: needle felt, work with metal, and draw. So, okay, so you've seen those now. That's great. I've made lots of needle felted pieces, and succulents, cactus, seaweed, and other forms of flora have attracted me as subject matter for neck pieces and shoulder brooches done with felt. Using a soft material like wool, merino wool, to make sharp, shiny, and slimy surfaces really appeals to me. So yeah, this is the part of the series of pieces. And these pieces were all in the show. There were, 6 of them? I think, in the show. So, okay. So the next is Scott's tools, and I don't know whether we have that, but that's okay. Some drawings. There we go. Okay, these are some drawings of my friend Scott Lindbergh's tools. He buys used tools at the flea market or garage sales that are unusual or have been modified for some specific purpose. And I don't think he ever pays more than $2 for them. I borrowed some of these to draw. He has them up all over his studio. There's just solid walls of these really wonderful tools. He has them all over the studio, and I finally asked if I could borrow some of them to draw, and found that they easily grouped themselves according to attitude. What I did was I laid them out on a table, and I just started looking at them, and they actually sort of grouped themselves. Some of them were really aggressive. Some of them were really, passive. Some of them were grabby. I mean, they just seem to work really well. in groups. So I grouped them together, and these are those tools. Okay, the next one is some of my favorite things. Yeah, this is some of my favorite things. The things on this bracelet are some things that I have saved over the years, thinking that I would use them sometime in a piece of work. And with COVID and not being able to travel and move around a whole lot, that's what I have been doing lately, is using these things that I have collected. I'm using them either singly or in groups. And this is not the way I usually work. And I don't know how long I'll end up doing this, because once I'm able to start traveling again, things may change. But it's been fun pulling out all these things that I thought were really wonderful things and trying to incorporate them into a piece of jewelry. Now, the next one is looking back. These are the pins that go on this big neck piece. This piece is a piece that I designed to wear to the opening at the museum, opening of my show at the museum. But it got so big and so heavy that, and it was also, I was afraid it would attract too much attention. I'm not crazy about having people, look at me like that. So, but each one of those pendants is from a piece that I've made over the years. It's a retrospective neck piece, and there are drawings on both sides of those pendants, and they are of pieces that I have done. One drawing per piece, and not all the pieces that I've done, but a lot of them. Anyway, it ended up being a great big piece and really a lot of fun. I kept finding more pieces that I wanted to remember and include. Most of the pieces that are in the show are actually on this neck piece. Okay, now the COVID beach one. Okay, these are the COVID beach walks pieces. There's 3 of them in this series, but this is 2 of them. I've written quite a bit about these pieces in lieu of a statement in the catalog. It's a group of meaningful pieces based on a weekly walk on a long, mostly empty beach in southern Santa Cruz County. It was something we counted on doing every Friday when we were all locked up with COVID. It included some interesting adventures and fostered some warm and lasting friendships. These were things that I picked up on the beach. The shell and the barnacle were things that I picked up on the beach and made pieces about. Anyway, so lots of texture. This is the same process that I used for the Cappadocia pieces, forming over plastic. So anyway. Yeah, so basically that's what I have in the slideshow. And I just want to say that there are a lot of pieces that didn't end up either in the catalog or in the show. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they were done in series. And when I could only find one piece from a series, somehow it didn't quite feel complete to me. When you've been working as long as I have, finding things is sometimes the hardest part of it. Just locating things to include in something like this. So anyway, but it's been a wonderful experience. And the show at the museum is absolutely beautiful. And the catalog is great too. So I appreciate, all of this. It's really pretty wonderful. So, okay. So I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any or comments.
Right. Yes. Thank you so much, Lynda, for having such a great talk and sharing your artistic experiences and your process. Right now, we're going to chat. That would be great. I have a few here, though, that I can go ahead and ask you, Lynda. The first is, what would you say is the most inspiring location that you visited? And I know it's hard because you've been to many beautiful,
God, it's really
inspiring
hard because,
places.
you know, yeah, sometimes it inspire other people, don't necessarily inspire me. I think probably, all in all, the experiences that I had in Southeast Asia, in Burma, Thailand, and Cambodia, more images, I think, came out of that. But I have to say that I've taken trips, like I spent some time in China. And when I came back from China, I went with Mary Hu, and we did this thing all around. And when I came back, I had too much in my head. I didn't end up making any pieces about it at all because there were all these conflicting images. And I could never settle on one thing that I really wanted to make. So that kind of thing does happen as well. And sometimes I'll have an absolutely wonderful experience somewhere and there won't necessarily be any visuals involved. And sometimes it's just a momentary thing that causes images that end up being a piece. So I just never know. And I kind of wait to see what happens in my head. And it often happens, like, you know, when I'm waking up in the morning or I'm laying there, all of a sudden I just start figuring out what I want to make next. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question we have is, what would be your advice to a student starting on the jewelry path today?
Oh my God. Well, I would say just have every experience you possibly can. You know, take classes and all kinds of stuff. I cannot tell you how much my background and the fact that I had done so much art and taken so many classes before I took metals. I can't tell you how much that has contributed to the way I work and the ideas that, you know, work for me. And I would just say, you know, broaden. Don't try to, you know, figure out how you're going to make a living right off the bat. But things are much harder now because when I went through school, I was able to, I mean, there were teaching jobs and stuff when I came out. That's not necessarily the case anymore. So it's a different thing. But I mean, just if I was a student, I would be taking classes, you know, in every discipline and then seeing how those contribute to working with metal, because I think that's incredibly important. And it might not even be working with the material, but the ideas and the way different disciplines are involved with aesthetics really, you know, helps as well. So, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question we have submitted is, so many of your pieces have a wonderful sound quality, and people are wondering how important sound is to you in your work. Do you think about sound when you're developing your pieces?
Lots of times.
Yeah, and what kind of are your favorite sounds, I guess?
Oh, I don't know. It's really hard to say because it depends on where you are and, you know, and what you're hearing. But yeah, I don't know exactly what my favorite would be.
The sound is important to your work. You think about that sometimes as you create?
Yeah, I do. And I listen to music and I listen to things as I work. You know, I always do. And I also listen to the radio and I listen to ball games in the summertime. So, you know, yeah.
All right. Let me see if there are any other
I
questions.
do like that jingly kind of, you know, the fact that,
Yeah, I'm sure there's so much sound
Yeah.
in play when you were developing that final
Just-
piece.
this piece particularly, that piece is like really jangly, you know.
Right.
And that's part of the reason I didn't want to wear it, because it was like, it was real loud and it was kind of a tension getting, and it was like, that's not really my MO. So yeah.
Well, I have a question for Lynda. Can you share with us some of your upcoming travel plans so we kind of have an idea of what artwork might be coming?
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, well, I'm going to the Yuma Symposium at the end of February, and that's a really wonderful place. You know, multidisciplinary presentations from people all over the United States. That's a really wonderful place to get ideas, and it's incredible. And it only goes for 3 days, and it's inexpensive, and it's great for students. And there's a lot of fun, and everybody just mingles. So it doesn't matter whether you're a luminary or whether you're a first, you know, a beginning student, you are all in the same place together, and that's wonderful. And after that, I have 1 day at home, and then I am going to Morocco for 18 days. And this is a trip that was planned before COVID, paid for before COVID, and was canceled twice, and is now on the agenda for February 28th to March 18th. So yeah, I'm looking very much forward to that, because I know that there's so much there to look at. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with some Moroccan stuff, so yeah, I'm excited about it. Yeah. And that's it for plans. I hope to get back to, well, I want to see my family, first of all. They're right here. Sometime this summer. And then I hope to get back to Cape Cod, because Cape Cod is really one of my most favorite places to be. And yeah. So.
All right, I've got a few more questions for you. Do you credit any part of your upbringing or background to your impulse to storytell in your artwork?
You know, I think my mom was a great storyteller, and I don't know. I don't even know exactly how. I never even realized actually that I was telling stories until I'd been making jewelry for quite a while. And then people started asking me what I was doing, you know, and I realized that I was talking about events that had happened, and that was really, I was telling stories. So yeah, I mean, I'm not generally a big, you know, I'm a big reader, but I'm not really a big storyteller, other than through my metal work. So, but they're important. The stories that I tell are important to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got another question for you. Someone writes, you traverse spatial dimensions in your work, often showing through an actual object, and it's drawing the natural inspiration that leads to the translation to metal and other materials that render the original object. When designing, do you see the dimensional explorations, or do they occur as you render them?
I usually see them beforehand. I mean, I have a pretty good idea of the dimensional quality when I really start drawing. And I often make models. I will often take paper or cardboard or something and just start moving it around and taping things together. I use lots of tape and building, you know, so that I can see what I'm after. The dimensional thing was really kind of difficult for me when I first started making jewelry, because I had been doing graphics and everything was pretty flat. And I mean, I could render things that were dimensional on a flat plane, but making dimensional things was really kind of fun. But like I said, I had taken lots and lots of crafts classes when I was doing my my illustration and drawing degree. So yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see, I'm not seeing any more questions. So anyone last call, drop your questions in the chat for Lynda, and I can ask her for you. Last call.
Thank you so much, everybody. It was fun to share stuff with you.
Yeah, well, thank you all for joining us today. My apologies for the tech issues, and thank you for working through it with us.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you so much for pulling it together at the end. That was pretty amazing. I mean,
museum work is all about improv. In case anybody wants to get into museums, it's all improv.
yes.
So again, special thank you to Lynda for sharing her time and talents with us. I also want to extend our gratitude to our incredible donors and members, some of whom are on the program today. Your support makes programming like this possible. So if anyone would like to support our programming or join as a member today, there are links in the chat if you scroll back up to the top, or you can find that on our website, metalmuseum.org. The exhibition is still on view. It's going to be closing after January 29th. So if you are local and would like to see it, please come on down. We look forward to seeing you. And thank you again for joining us today. We hope to see you at the museum soon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.